I provided a brief explanation of the immigration laws and then nearly yelled out of anger for their ignorance. It's not even our land anyway. The US stole it from the Native Americans. Anyone should be allowed to live here and anywhere they want. Why do we even have borders? I stormed out of the restaurant and sat outside for 20 minutes while I recomposed myself. I eventually returned, and we all agreed to stop talking about politics. Our conversation returned to its usual subjects: the men in our lives, shopping deals, our jobs, past and future group activities, and gossip. So, when Jason mentioned our friends in Vegas as a selling point, to me it was equally a point of contention. They nicknamed me Hippie because I did my best to ensure people recycled, and I was upset for months that our apartment building didn't have recycling. One day, I even drove our empty bottles and boxes 30 minutes across town to recycle them. I later reconciled with Jason's reasoning this wasted more time and gas than it was worth it to recycle or refuse. It was only my concern for the environment which earned me that name. I barely spoke about politics or social justice since no one else wanted to discuss those issues. If they did, most friends held the conservative stance of leaving things how they were. But since they had such little awareness of how things were, it was never much of a conversation. We could talk about politics with John and Anna and some of our other work friends, but not with the majority of our close friends. And I still couldn't talk about it with his family. On the other hand, I loved my friends and we always supported each other emotionally and professionally. We could always count on one another to lift us up, listen to our heartaches, and celebrate one another's birthdays with grandiose delight. We truly loved each other, but we just didn't talk about anything bigger than our little world. I knew there was a bigger world out there in which to travel and educate ourselves on others' lives and circumstances. I knew that my friends and family back home understood that, and more importantly, actualized it. Yet Jason was more content than he'd ever been in our little circle. It was his life mission to continue that lifestyle and to keep me a part of it. So our argument slash my whining continued as a near monthly pattern. The next time I said, "Yes, I like it here, but I love it back home. Please, can we move back home?" He laughed. "What is it this time, babe?" "I miss nature," I whined. "There's trees and grass right outside and a pool." "That's not what I mean," I pouted. "I need real trees and water." The landscaped trees in our apartment complex were barely a few years old, and the pool was not a natural water source. He laughed again. I think this all amused him. "Those are real trees. Do you mean evergreens?" I felt a little calmer once I knew he understood me. I took a deep breath and nodded. He stroked my arm. "Okay, babe. We can go to Mount Charleston and Lake Mead more often. Will that make you happy?" I nodded again and then vehemently shook my head. "That would be nice, but it's not enough." Mount Charleston is a large mountain about an hour north of Vegas, but it's not visible from the city the way Mount Rainier and the Olympics are from the northwest. Lake Mead is larger than Lake Washington, but it's surrounded by desert, and to me it didn't have the same beauty as the latter. Then he got more practical. "Could we even get jobs back home? We couldn't before we moved, so why do you think we would be able to now?" "Well, the economy has gotten a lot better lately under President Obama," I offered, and then suggested. "What if we got jobs at Travel Co. headquarters and convinced them to pay to move us back? It's their fault we live here in the first place. I bet we could talk them into it." He laughed. "You're very optimistic. Sure, if that happens, I'll consider it." I looked for jobs at headquarters every day for a month and still found very little for which I was qualified. When I did find one, I told Jason about it. "Honey, this job sounds great. What do you think? Should I apply? And if I do, and I get it, could we move?" "Sure, you can apply. But what about me? Are there any jobs I could get?" "I haven't found anything yet. Maybe you could finish your AA and then get a bachelor's degree. That would make you eligible for a lot more jobs." "Yeah, I guess I could look into it. I don't know, though. I'm not sure how my credits would transfer here." He seemed sullen. I became excited enough for both of us. "Let's look into it. You only have 2 classes left, right? I'm pretty sure there's reciprocity programs." He patted me on the shoulder. "Okay, babe. I'll look into it." Over the next few weeks, I asked him excitedly a few times. Did you find anything out? Can you finish your AA here? He responded, No, babe. It's a lot of work. Maybe later. Then his answer eventually became, I'll think about it, but I'm not ready to look into it at this point. I finally stopped asking about school, but I still asked about moving home every month or so. One day, Jason got tired of the question, stood up, and firmly said, You can go if you want. I'll be here, but you do what you want. I tried once more, and he said the same thing, but with more anger. The more frequently he responded that way, the less frequently I asked the question. I didn't want him to become angry, and I wanted to be part of his life more than anything. His love kept me happy more than any aspect of the Northwest and kept me on my life mission of quote unquote success. There was also a large part of me that enjoyed contentment, stability, and a life focused on love instead of paying attention to the news and all the misery of all that was wrong with the world. Chapter 7 Warning Signs. This chapter shows a lot of the emotional abuse I endured. He called me names, he told me I couldn't do anything right, easily got angry and expected me to find solutions to make him happy, and quote unquote teased me that I quote don't have a sense of humor or know how to cook, end quote. Even though all these things are objectively horrible, I did not know what emotional abuse was at the time, so I did not know that was what it was. I thought that he was just a person that got angry often and that sometimes he took it out on me. In addition to the emotional abuse, it may also be a warning sign how easily he got angry. In a healthy relationship, people do experience anger, but not super frequently, and they do not take it out on their partner. I tried to focus on the good times instead of the abuse. I even wrote, as long as Jason was happy and not criticizing me, I didn't mind too much. This is a warning sign in that I ignored things that bothered me and turned that energy to what was going well. In a good relationship, people can communicate to one another about problems they have with each other. I was happy that Jason had Clint to keep him happy, which made me feel less responsible for his happiness. I don't know why I felt responsible for his happiness, but I did. The few times I was able to make suggestions that he liked gave me motivation to continue trying, so I felt as though I had the ability to change his mood. In hindsight, I recognize that humans are not responsible for other humans' moods. We can try and help, but we are not responsible for the outcomes of our assistance. In New Beginnings, the domestic violence advocacy group where I volunteered, we have a Bill of Rights. One of the rights says, I am not responsible for other adults' problems. I know this now, but I did not know it at the time. I was generally unhappy living in Las Vegas. I felt it was the complete opposite of living in Seattle, isolated from friends and family, in the desert, and in a different political climate. Jason never seemed to understand this or care that I didn't like living there. This is another example of his lack of empathy. I was grateful that he eventually learned how to listen to me and support me through his work stress. However, once I taught him how to communicate about stresses, he took over the conversations and gave me less and less time to talk about my own stresses. This is another example of him being selfish and taking control over our dynamic. When Jason told Clint that he could hook up with Jenny if he wanted to, he showed another example of being patriarchal and sexist. Sexism is a warning sign in a heterosexual relationship because it shows that the abuser believes men should have power and privilege over women. He even said, I think she has a boyfriend, but I bet you could still get with her if you want. This statement shows that he did not care about Jenny and her feelings, but simply saw her body as an objective for his friend. This showed a lack of respect for women, even his sister's best friend, which is sexism. I found it horrifying when he said it, but at the time, I didn't translate his lack of respect of Jenny to his lack of respect for myself. I ended the chapter with, his love kept me happy more than any aspect of the Northwest and kept me on my life mission of success. Even though he was emotionally abusing me, disrespecting women, and disregarding my feelings about living in Las Vegas, I was still focused on my success goals and therefore still optimistic about the future Jason and I could have together. I had zero thoughts about leaving him through all of this. I was feeling emotionally dependent on him for love and support, and there were times he did give me that. Those times were the ones I held on to, the ones I focused on, and the ones that propelled me to move our relationship forward. That is the cycle of violence, shown here through emotional violence. Abusers bring their partners down through various forms of abuse and then bring them back up again, which creates dependency and cravings for those good times, much like an addiction. Thank you for listening to this episode of Warning Signs. The music in this episode is Skipping Stones by Ian Post. Will Downing produces the audio editing. For more about me and my group therapy and workshops, please see my website at www.katemageau.com. The link is in the show notes, and it is spelled www.katemageau.com. And if you can't wait to hear what happens next, you can buy my books on my website. Thank you so much for your support. You can also support me by downloading episodes, as each download gives me a tiny commission. Liking and subscribing also help. Thank you. I appreciate you. I'll see you next week.